In the summer of 1529, the fate of Europe hung by a thread. A vast Ottoman army, led by one of history's most formidable sultans, marched relentlessly toward Vienna, the gateway to the heart of the continent. What followed was a clash not just of armies, but of civilizations, faiths, and futures. Would the Ottomans break through the city's walls, or would Vienna stand as the bulwark against an empire that seemed unstoppable? This is the story of the Siege of Vienna, a pivotal moment that changed European history forever. The early 16th century was a time of great upheaval in Europe and beyond. The Ottoman Empire, under Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, was expanding rapidly. Since the late 14th century, the Ottomans had conquered vast territories in the Balkans and were pushing deeper into Central Europe. Their influence stretched from the gates of Constantinople to the Danube River, threatening the very balance of power in Europe. Vienna, the capital of the Habsburg dynasty, was strategically vital. It guarded the western approaches to the empire's lands and acted as a defensive linchpin for the Holy Roman Empire and Christendom itself. The Ottomans saw Vienna as both a prize and a stepping stone. Capturing it could open the floodgates to the rest of Europe. At the same time, Europe was divided and struggling. The Holy Roman Empire was a patchwork of states, often at odds with one another. The Reformation was just beginning to stir religious tensions. Yet despite internal conflicts, the threat of the Ottomans demanded unity. Emperor Charles V and his brother King Ferdinand I knew they had to prepare for what might be the greatest military challenge of their time. Suleiman assembled an army estimated between 100,000 to 150,000 men, comprising elite janissaries, cavalry, artillery units, and auxiliary forces from across the empire. This massive force set out from Istanbul in early 1529, intent on conquering Vienna and securing Ottoman dominance in Europe. By late September 1529, the Ottoman forces had reached Vienna. The city's defenders, led by Count Nicholas Salm and supported by local militia and a small force of imperial troops, numbered roughly 20,000, vastly outnumbered but fiercely determined. Vienna was well fortified but not invincible. Its medieval walls had been reinforced, but the city had never faced a siege of this scale. The defenders quickly set about preparing for a protracted battle, strengthening walls, stockpiling supplies, and rallying citizens. Suleiman's army encircled the city and began siege operations. Ottoman artillery pounded the walls, attempting to breach them. Engineers worked to dig tunnels and undermine the fortifications. The janissaries prepared for an assault, confident in their superior numbers and firepower. Inside the city, the mood was tense. Food supplies were limited, and the defenders knew they faced overwhelming odds. Disease and fatigue started to take their toll. Yet the people of Vienna refused to surrender, holding fast with grim determination. The Ottomans employed advanced siege tactics for the time. Their use of massive cannons and organized artillery barrages was cutting edge, designed to create breaches for infantry attacks. They used sappers to tunnel under the walls, intending to cause collapses. Meanwhile, cavalry units scouted and harassed any relief forces. But the defenders were resourceful. Count Salm and his commanders orchestrated sorties, daring counterattacks against Ottoman siege works, disrupting their operations and slowing their progress. Citizens joined in, manning defenses and fighting bravely. Winter was approaching, and with it came new challenges for the Ottoman army. The supply lines stretched thin over difficult terrain. Food shortages and cold weather weakened the soldiers. Disease spread rapidly among the camps and morale began to waver. Despite the fierce fighting and constant pressure, the Ottomans failed to break through Vienna's defenses. The siege dragged on for weeks, but the defenders held their ground. UWs of the siege had reached other parts of Europe, spurring calls for aid. King Ferdinand the Frarn was able to muster a relief force, though it arrived slowly due to the political and military complexities of the time. By mid-October, the Ottoman forces faced increasing difficulties. The combination of dwindling supplies, harsh weather, and the prospect of a relief army forced Sultan Suleiman to reconsider his position. The decision to lift the siege was not taken lightly. The Ottomans had come close to breaching the city, but the cost of continuing seemed too great. Slowly and cautiously, the Ottoman army began its retreat back toward Hungary. This withdrawal marked the end of the first major Ottoman attempt to conquer Vienna. Though the city was spared, the threat remained for decades to come. The Siege of Vienna in 1529 was more than just a military engagement. It was a defining moment for Europe. It demonstrated that the Ottoman Empire, while powerful, was not invincible. The successful defense boosted European morale and inspired resistance against Ottoman expansion. The siege also underscored the importance of cooperation among European states. Despite their internal conflicts, they recognized the necessity of unity in the face of a common threat. The event laid the groundwork for future alliances and military campaigns aimed at containing Ottoman ambitions. For the Ottomans, the siege was a lesson in the limits of their power in Europe. Although they would return to lay siege again in 1683, a siege that would ultimately fail and mark the beginning of the empire's gradual decline, 1529 showed that Vienna was a formidable barrier. Culturally, the siege entered European consciousness as a symbol of resistance, faith, and survival. It inspired stories, songs, and art celebrating the defenders' courage and the city's endurance. The Siege of Vienna in 1529 was more than just a military engagement. It was a defining moment for Europe. It demonstrated that the Ottoman Empire, while powerful, was not invincible. The successful defense boosted European morale and inspired resistance against Ottoman expansion. The siege also underscored the importance of cooperation among European states. Despite their internal conflicts, they recognized the necessity of unity in the face of a common threat. The event laid the groundwork for future alliances and military campaigns aimed at containing Ottoman ambitions. For the Ottomans, the siege was a lesson in the limits of their power in Europe. Although they would return to lay siege again in 1683, a siege that would ultimately fail and mark the beginning of the empire's gradual decline, 1529 showed that Vienna was a formidable barrier. Culturally, the siege entered European consciousness as a symbol of resistance, faith, and survival. It inspired stories, songs, and art, celebrating the defenders' courage and the city's endurance.